Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together each week here. Well, that would go without saying, wouldn't it? We are working with the Department of Redundancy Department at the federal government level for our bailout money. Weekly, we put the program together, and we send it out to you across the Commonwealth of Virginia on some great radio stations, as well as then put it up online through our YouTube channel. Search Freedom and Prosperity Radio. But we do so much more at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Find out all about our work, our white papers, the legislative agendas that we have worked with in the past and we continue to work with in the future at virginiainstitute.org. This week's program, we've got a couple of hot-button topics that are really at the core of so much of the malaise and the angst that Americans are feeling. And the first is making a living. Poverty. What is it and where is it and why does it seem like public officials seem so inept at dealing with it? Our first guest is Amber Northern. She's Senior Vice President for Research at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. Penned a great op-ed, "What you make depends on where you live, not just whether you went to college." Amber, Dr. Northern, thank you very much. I'd call you that, but it sounds an awful lot like Dr. Northam, who is our governor, and I don't want to confuse people. But Amber, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you, sir. And every time I go to the local CVS, the lady always asks me, "Are you his wife?" I'm like, "No, I am not."
That's an N.
Anyhow, not a mistake.
Oh, we appreciate your efforts. And there have been some similar things done locally through here in our flagship city where researchers kind of looked at different pockets of the city and what the cost of living is to live there. But talk about what started you on this track to this investigation into what is a living wage and how you get there.
Sure. So I think where it all started is just we were noticing that more and more attention was obviously being paid to kids going to college, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, most folks, agree that a college education is a good idea. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like it was becoming a bit of an obsession nationally that, that we have to get every single child into college, every student to college, because, it's a springboard into the middle class. But what we really found is that there's more to the story than that. I mean, it's true that nationally you're going to make, on average, a better living with a 4-year college degree, but it depends a heck of a lot on where you live, the geography, the cost of living there, the cost of college, where you go to college, what you majored in, whether you finished college, and so on and so forth. So we felt like there was a much more complicated and interesting story beyond the idea that everybody's got to go to college and the whole obsession we have nationally with that. And just uncovering, there are ways that students can make a good middle-class living in other routes that don't go through a traditional 4-year university.
Is it also, and I'm thinking back, I have a few miles on my odometer, and I know I sound so very young, but
yes.
But I remember a time when college was really sort of a not so much as a training center as we see it now, almost a modern licensing bureau where you come out with a piece of paper that says you're qualified to hold this job, more as a place of experimentation, figure out what it is you're good at, and follow those eddies and currents to a career that will be fulfilling to you. So, you always feel like you're contributing to your community. We've become less about that. And I think through the 80s and early 90s, it became just get that MBA and you're set for life. And there were people who I watch on many college campuses who just looked miserable, slogging through a mediocre collegiate career, getting the MBA they were told they have to get. And they're miserable adults as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's another, point that we have research behind. We know that about only a third of graduating seniors are actually ready to go to college. I mean, we have data on lots of this. And so if we've got about only a third of graduating seniors that are prepared to go to college, 2/3 go anyway, prepared or not, and then you have half of those that are going to drop out eventually. I mean, that's a pretty big number. It means either they weren't prepared, or to your point, they got there and were miserable for whatever reason, didn't know what the experience was going to be like, and then they're left with with the college debt. That doesn't get wiped away. So you've got no degree and a load of debt. So it's really important that young people realize what the college experience is all about, that they're prepared, and that they know what they're getting into.
Does it seem like a reverse equation? The more we spend individually per year on K to 12 elementary and the money that's dedicated in our school fundings to guidance counselors, those were the people when I was in high school that were trying to help you, would look at your, to talk to your teachers and say, well, Joe seems to be good at talking and making jokes, and maybe he should do radio. But those were the kind of things that the guidance counselor classically was supposed to be for, to work with your teachers to help you develop a plan for what you were going to do after the very structured K-12 experience.
That's right. And what we're finding is a lot of those counselors aren't prepared to give kids guidance beyond the traditional 4-year degree. So we're finding that some states are actually trying to do a better job equipping counselors and other adults in the school to, explain to kids, you can also make a good living in advanced manufacturing, in IT, in healthcare. If you have a solid technical degree, certificate, and apprenticeship, any of these other avenues other than the 4-year degree, that you can make a good job. We call these other occupations middle skills jobs. And so it means you need more than high school, but less than a 4-year degree. And what we want to do is get more adults like counselors in the schools being able to sort of lead kids, okay, if you want to get, a job in, again, AT, IT, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, these other really promising avenues for a good living wage, and they need to be able to tell them, okay, here are some other options to get that credential. Here are some good apprenticeships or trade programs in our local area that will equip you, that sort of thing. And we're seeing that, that's not often being done. So there's a handful of other states that are going another route, and they're actually trying to have these elaborate websites where they show kids, okay, here are the most popular and high-wage industries in your area. Mm-hmm. You can go here, you can click on it, and you can see what other types of programs to your technical, community colleges, technical programs that will prepare you for that particular high-need industry in your area. And that's hugely helpful.
Well, is there also the mischaracterization to our, especially high school-age children, that college has a shelf life? Like, well, if you're not done by 24, I'm sorry, you're expired, and we're going to have to put you... because, for example, my father-in-law emigrated to this country in the early 50s. He was a machinist, worked in a factory, put himself through school, worked with the union he helped create, and by the time he was in his 40s or so, he had finished a degree in labor management from Cornell University, had an Ivy League degree, never, actually set foot on the campus, took it through an extension, which in those days was what we do now with online learning. But the idea that you have to do it when you're 18 to 22 versus get out there, get working. If you feel like you need more, go get that degree. A lot of colleges now are even including, the life experiences as collegiate credits in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like, community colleges do a better job of marketing to returning adults, those who maybe stopped school because they, had a family, or, again, found a job right out of high school, realized that there was, no long-term career trajectory there, and wanted to return. So, but yeah, I mean, our 4-year institutions do less of a good job marketing to non-traditional students is the term that they use. But absolutely, that's important. I mean, we want students and kids, especially out of high school, to know they call them career pathways, where you can get on and off the career ramp at any time. So the nursing is our best example. Oh, yeah. Kids can go and get a healthcare, health sciences degree, take some career and technical courses, which we should talk about here in a minute, in high school, work in maybe a nursing home, like a nursing home assistant, and then keep going, get that 2-year degree, then get that 4-year RN, and then they can keep going and get that nurse practitioner degree. But they can see, all along the way, I'm going to earn, a good wage here, but I can keep on. I can keep grabbing more credentials and more education and keep furthering my my income. And so, if we can begin to show kids, okay, this is the pathway, and you can get on and off, whenever you need to, get back on after you have a family and keep going. My sister-in-law is a great example. She was an RN, and then her kids are in college now. She went back, and now she's a nurse practitioner. And so that's the type of thing we should be doing to explain to kids better. It's not, you can keep getting educated no matter how old you are, no matter what your life circumstances are. Here's a pathway to do it.
It's interesting. I know some MDs and some department heads at university hospitals that started as RNs, nursing degrees at a community college. And then, in some cases, the doctors that they would work for say, well, you make us a better practice if you've got more skills. So they would pay for you to go to school. And many industries do that. We're visiting with Amber Northern. She is the Senior Vice President for Research at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. Great piece. What you make depends on where you live, not just whether you went to college. And you were talking about career and technical schools, and I did a program with our Chamber of Commerce some time ago called Trading Up, demystifying the idea that the skilled trades were somewhat, an easy gig, but also, something to not aspire to. And we had all sorts of people who build houses and did nursing and, all these things that were 2-year degrees at the most, and really in many cases apprenticeships turned into careers from there with no debt, nothing like that. Right. Is that what you're kind of talking about and doing more of that?
Absolutely. I think these career and technical, we used to call them vocational education, was kind of a stigma to it, where we would steer kids who we didn't think had any chance at college, and we would, there was often some discriminatory practices involved. It has sort of a sordid history. But what we're seeing today is sort of, the new version of career and technical education, which is really high-quality career and technical education for all kids. Even if you want to go to a traditional 4-year degree, then these courses will still prepare you for that, because they're academic in nature, but they're also specialized to a particular trade or industry. And so there are more and more, places across the Commonwealth. They're doing a nice job with developing these regional centers. Often it costs a lot to buy this machinery to prepare kids for, careers in IT or advanced manufacturing or healthcare. So sometimes they pool their resources regionally and have these regional CTE high schools, and they're quite promising. And what we're finding is, if they're done well, they do prepare kids. If they choose to go right out of that program, they can get it, as long as they're getting the right technical degree, they can do quite well. And so, I think we need to continue to improve career and technical education and what it could what it could give kids in the future. One thing we did with our study is we actually looked across the country and tried to find where you could live on a 2-year or technical degree as that's your sole income in your family. And we did find that Pittsburgh, Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Cleveland, Louisville, there are these cities across the country where if you have, a solid technical or 2-year degree, you can buy a median-priced home in those cities. So it matters which, you choose wisely. But there are quite a few of these middle skills jobs, as I said earlier, that don't require a 4-year degree, but more than high school. I think this is a message that gets lost in our obsession with trying to send all kids to college, even if a child doesn't want lots of these kids don't want a white collar job, or they don't want to sit behind a desk all day, and so we need to acknowledge that and make sure that they're prepared.
You mentioned also areas where you could find the affordable housing. What factor does that play in some of this, Amber? Because I feel like housing, like many things, is a commodity that we don't treat like a commodity, or we don't speak of economically like a commodity. Scarcity equals higher costs. You don't have to be a De Beers family member to get that. So are some of these areas where maybe they had big industry that have receded, and now they're just trying to find places so that the availability of housing for a lower price is there?
Right. I mean, I think what we're seeing is just the general trend is where you have a high cost of living and high housing. D.C., Boston, San Francisco, New York City, those places you're going to need to have that 4-year degree. Because, again, it's the cost of living, it's the cost of housing that, you're not going to be able to make it in some of these big cities with less than that standard traditional degree. But when you go to some of these, smaller states, smaller cities, rural areas, where the cost of housing, the cost of living is much lower, we're seeing where you can make a good living on a 2-year technical degree. In some cases, the difference between a 4-year and a 2-year degree, what you're going to get paid, can be as slim as 14 to 15%. Especially in some of these states where they're rich in industry, oil and natural gas and coal. So when you look at, Vermont, Wyoming, Alaska, South Dakota, Montana, New Mexico, these are places where, again, the cost of living is lower than the big city, and kids can often live there and live on make a good living wage with less than a 4-year degree because the cost of housing most definitely factors into that.
Do you find in your work, Amber, that we also fail our kids sometimes when we don't spend time enough with them to try to figure out what it is that drives them, and it may not be specifically, he likes taking apart the TV set, so he might want to be an electrician, but the attitudes towards cooking or fixing things or building things and or an eye towards mathematics, finding out those things that kids love to do and then saying, here are the careers that involve these things you love to do.
That's right. And that's exactly what you said is what we're driving towards now, is trying to prepare kids not for an occupation. Not, you're going to be a plumber when you grow up, or you're going to be, a mathematician or whatever it might be, but instead to prepare them for a skill set, like a bunch of related skills that then apply to an industry. So, advanced manufacturing is a good example. Healthcare is a good example. I mean, there are multiple skills that are involved when you go and try to be prepared for an industry such as advanced manufacturing. But it's not, you're going to make a particular part the rest of your life. It's like whatever you learn is going to be applicable to, automation in general, right, and robotics in general. So we need to do a better job of just, again, preparing kids with multiple skills, multiple skill sets, and knowledge about an entire industry and not one job within an industry. And that's where we've not done well in the past. But I think, again, a lot of these career and technical programs that we're seeing today are preparing kids where if you've got the right skill set, you can move among industries because you see that some of these skills are applicable to different types of jobs.
So here's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. As a matter of when you talk about it, your report, I go on at probably distraction about these sorts of things. But as a general pop culture rule, our public schools, our government-operated schools, are promoting this idea, and then they subsidize the university system with Pell Grants and FOSFA and Sally Mae and Bernie Mac or whoever, all these different loan programs that incentivize colleges just to kind of become the recipient of this. How do we turn that wheel? If it seems like there's a pipeline almost now that's churning, and it really just goes to the academia, the professorial class. I speak to them that way, but it doesn't seem like anything we can change as long as there's this motive of, profit, if you want to call it that, but at least income from it.
Yeah. So I think, one lever to pull is on the employer side. So, employers can get really lazy, right? They can screen out candidates just based on their credentials.
Sure. Sure.
I see they got a 4-year degree from, fill in your Ivy League school or your Research One university. And instead of taking the time to figure out whether that individual actually has the skills and knowledge for that particular position. And so that's one way, that's one place where we really need to target. A much better way, right, and we are seeing more and more employers and industries do this, is make that candidate do some type of assessment or homework before you even hire them and get them in the door. And we're seeing more and more of this, where it's not just we're going to use your resume to say, you've got the 4-year degree from so-and-so, and we're going to use that as sort of our litmus test or our proxy for what we really want you to know. Instead, we're going to give you a little test, whatever it might look like on the job. We do this at Fordham when we hire. We give them 2 or 3 tasks that mimic what your job's actually going to look like. And then we look at it, and we talk through it and say, okay, how'd they do that? And we put just as much or maybe more importance on that homework and that assessment that we give as to that resume. And I think if we can get, employers sort of accustomed to doing those types of things instead of just getting lazy and screening out on credentials, we'll be in a better place to attack some of these issues that you're raising.
It almost sounds like the old classic apprenticeship model where you would apprentice with a company for 6 months while they figured out if you brought the kind of things they needed for the job. That sort of thing, almost trying to bring it back. Dr. Northern, not Northam, Dr. Northern, thank you so much for spending time with us this week. It's great stuff. We'll link back to your piece at fordhaminstitute.org. And read it's called What You Make Depends on Where You Live, Not Just Whether You Went to College. And I appreciate the research you've done into it. It's great, and I hope it helps inform the public policymakers, too, going forward, and the business leaders.
As do I. Thanks again for having me.
Not at all. Coming up next, another one of those real obscure issues that nobody ever talks about. Healthcare, and Dr. Lee Gross, president of Docs for Patient Care Foundation. We're going to talk about direct primary care associations. Next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.